And you're back inside of Mission Control Houston. Dan Hewitt here, and I'm joined now by Ray Biganis, one of our visiting vehicle officers with the flight team here. We're doing we've been talking to a few people as we're getting ready for the first orbital launch of Cygnus, scheduled to launch next week on September 17th, docking with the International Space Station on September 22nd. Now, Ray, you're a visiting vehicle officer. Real quick, what is that? What is your role here in Mission Control?
Yep, I am a visiting vehicle officer, VVO. We're a space station flight controller that's responsible for the dynamic flight of any visiting vehicle coming up to the space station. So we look at Cygnus, which is coming up next week, the SpaceX Dragon vehicle, JAXA's HTV, ESA's ATV, and all the Russian vehicles. So we kind of have our hands full. There's a lot of traffic going to and from the space station these days. Absolutely. So we look at the dynamic flight of the vehicles. We make sure that the vehicle's on a safe trajectory as intended, and we make sure that they're following the timeline, that the crew is involved in the right way, and everything's proceeding safely.
Now, this is going to be the very first Cygnus to ever get to travel to the International Space Station. Is there anything special you guys are doing for this flight? Any preparation you're going through?
Yeah, this has been a work in progress for the last 3 to 4 years. For me, some of us in mission operations have been working on Cygnus for 5, 6, 7 years, and I know Orbital's been working on it for a long time too.
So it's a long time coming.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is a huge milestone for us. This first flight, we've had to watch as Orbital designs the vehicle to make sure that it meets all of our requirements for safety and for the prudent flight of the vehicle. We've had to generate all the new ops products, all the timelines, all the procedures that the crew uses. We've had to, the biggest thing for the first flight is that we've had to design the demonstrations that the vehicle does to prove once it gets in orbit that it's viable and it can actually...
What are some of those demonstrations?
Well,
so it's not just flying up and docking.
No, it doesn't go straight. Well, it is kind of going straight to ISS, but along the way, it's doing 10 demonstrations, all the way from just proving that it can perform attitude control, all the way to making sure that its close-in proximity sensors are working the way they should. So there's 10 demonstrations, and we've had to develop the pass-fail criteria for those. We've had to work very closely with Orbital to make sure that here's the standards that we expect the vehicle to perform to, and please show us along the way. So it's going to be an interesting couple of days prior to the actual capture as they demonstrate the full capability of their vehicle.
Is there any part of the flight that you're especially looking forward to, that capture or anything?
The last 200 meters is really where we train for the most dynamic part of the flight. We're pulling up, Cygnus is pulling up right underneath ISS. It's inside what we call the keep out sphere. We don't allow any vehicles inside the keep out sphere unless they have demonstrated that they can approach safely and have the proper fault tolerance. So inside 200 meters is where my job really comes into play. We give them a go to approach if everything's looking good, and in particular inside 200 meters, the crew is involved quite a bit. The ISS crew, they're looking out the window, they're looking at their camera views, they're looking at telemetry coming from Cygnus and making sure that the vehicle's in the right place.
Okay. Now, Cygnus makes it there. It'll be the second U.S. commercial company to be resupplying the International Space Station. What are some of the differences between, from your position, monitoring these vehicles compared to these commercial vehicles compared to, say, the international partner resupply ships like an HTV or an ATV or a Progress?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First and foremost, it's different people from different countries. The two American commercial vehicles are, of course, in America, but they're two completely different companies that have different ways of doing things, different personnel, completely different procedures sometimes. So in dealing with more than one at a time, sometimes it's hard to keep track of the little subtle nuances of this one versus the other ones. And of course, when we start dealing with JAXA and ESA and the Russians, there's of course the language differences are hard to overcome sometimes. The vehicles are all completely different, so we have to keep track of the design of one versus the design of the other, and then at the end of the day, we have to tell the crew how each vehicle is different, because they may have just grappled a HTV4 last month, and now they've got a Cygnus coming up. We don't want them thinking that they're the same, because they're completely different vehicles.
Okay, well, yeah, like you're saying, a lot of preparation work goes into not only for the astronauts but the teams down here on the ground getting ready for these vehicles. Cygnus, a fairly historical milestone, will be the second commercial provider to come online, resupplying the International Space Station. Right here will be our visiting vehicle officer inside Mission Control Houston during that very historic moment for the station and space flight in general. Ray, thanks so much for joining me here today, giving us a little insight into the inner workings of the team behind the upcoming demonstration. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Go Cygnus.
That's all right.